The Auto Union racing car. Its first public appearance was just as sensational as a new trademark. 4 interlocking rings, symbolic of the Olympics, a programmatic expression of sporting ambitions. The Auto Union was created in 1932 from the 4 marques native of German Saxony: Audi, DKW, Porsche and Wanderer. The headquarters of the new company were located in Chemnitz, but most of the cars with the 4 rings on the radiator grille were built in Zwickau. The racing department was established in the Porsche works, and its employees were ideally prepared for this new task, thanks to their experience in handling 8-cylinder engines and the high-quality standards required for this work. "20 mechanics were responsible for the engine, 6 for the gearboxes and axles, and 12 for the chassis. 20 metalsmiths alone were needed for the bodywork and other sheet metal work. This was not surprising, because the aluminium bodies of the silver arrows were all handmade. All parts, including cylinder liners, the engine block and the main engine bearings, were machined in the Porsche series production plant. In particular, the high-strength steel root superchargers required a great deal of intricate rework. The racing car was designed by Ferdinand Porsche. His concept called for a 4.4-litre engine, its displacement being distributed over a large number of small units to give a V-type 16-cylinder arrangement. The ignition mixture was injected into the engine through a supercharger. Each cylinder was to have 1 inlet valve and 1 outlet valve. All 32 valves were controlled by a central camshaft. In the first engine, a single-piece crankshaft was still used. However, the vibration and elasticity problems could not be solved with the required length and loading. A decision was therefore taken to gear the individual crankshaft segments and screw them together. Porsche had realized that the key problem with the new formula, 750 kilograms maximum permissible weight without tires, fuel and water, was not so much the increase in performance, but more the translation of these powerful forces into acceleration and speed while attaining good road holding. This prompted him to shift the center of gravity to the rear in his design and position the engine and gearbox behind the driver. The elasticity of the engine during a test conducted by test engineer Eberan Eberhorst on the test rig was astonishing from the very beginning. The maximum engine speed of 4,500 revs per minute was remarkably low for a racing car even at that time. It developed close to 300 horsepower and reached its maximum torque at just 2,700 revs per minute. In his contract with Auto Union, Porsche had agreed to the acceptance condition that the car had to drive 10 laps of the Avus racing circuit and reach a speed of at least 250 kilometers per hour on each straight. The first test drives took place in autumn of that same year on the Nurburgring racing circuit, and on the 6th of March 1934, a mere 364 calendar days after work had started, Stuck drove the agreed 10 laps of the Avus circuit and set a world record of 217.110 kilometers in 1 hour. In order to set this record, he had to drive at a maximum speed of 270 kilometers per hour on the straights. In addition to Hans Stuck, the first Auto Union racing team included August Momberger, Prince Leiningen, and as reserve driver Wilhelm Sebastian. In 1934, the Auto Union car took part in over a dozen races in Germany and Europe, including a race at the Avus circuit in Berlin for the first time. Hans Stuck, who held the lead for a long time, eventually had to retire. A few days later, the water pump broke down in Montlery. In the German Grand Prix at the Nurburgring racing circuit, Hans Stuck at last took his chance brilliantly. With start number 1, his car was the first to cross the finishing line after 500 kilometers over the twisty and hilly circuit. A loud cheer went up when Stuck took the checkered flag as the race winner. The leading drivers, racing manager Walb and designer Porsche, had every reason to be proud of the first year of racing. Stuck won 3 Grand Prix and became German road racing champion and German hill climbing champion. In 1934, Bernd Rosemeyer had secured a place in the works team together with Paul Pietsch after test drives. He only drove the Auto Union racing car for another 3 years. Rosemeyer made his debut at the Avus race in 1935. He chalked up his first victory at the end of the same season in Brunn. In the second season, the team comprised Rosemeyer and Stuck, as well as the newcomer Paul Pietsch and the experienced driver Achille Varzi. The cars were also improved constantly. For example, the A model, which still had a rigid rear axle and transversal leaf springs, became the B model, fitted with a new rear axle and torsion bar springs designed especially by Porsche. The C model, brought out in 1936, developed 520 horsepower from a 6-litre engine. The 1936 was without doubt the most successful year for Auto Union. The team-up between Auto Union and Bernd Rosemeyer proved unbeatable. During the international Eifel race, the Nurburgring racing circuit showed the vagaries of the weather. Right from the start, the race developed into a head-to-head struggle between Bernd Rosemeyer and Tazio Nuvolari. The world-class Italian driver, driving an Alfa Romeo, had built up an 8-second lead by lap 5. However, Rosemeyer closed the gap steadily and was just a few meters behind Nuvolari at the pits on the 6th lap. Rosemeyer then took the lead on the back straight, much to the delight of the spectators. A few minutes later, thick fog blanketed most of the course and reduced visibility to little more than 50 meters. Bernd Rosemeyer was the only driver in the field who continued lapping at almost the same speed as before, when visibility was good. He finally won the race 2 minutes 13 seconds ahead of Nuvolari. Rosemeyer's victory meant a great deal, but Nuvolari was still regarded by insiders at the time as one of the best drivers ever. He was also considered to be one of the most sporting drivers, because after young Rosemeyer gained victory, Nuvolari expressed genuine joy at his success. The female aviator Ellie Beinhorn, who was attached to Bernd Rosemeyer since their first encounter at the Brunn Grand Prix in 1935, and his companion at the races, looks back to that era.
Das war eine ganz besondere Freundschaft. Die beiden, der Nuvolari.
The friendship between the two men was very special. Nuvolari was, if you like, one of the fairest competitors. When he realized that the other driver was quicker, he signaled to let him pass. And although both of them could only talk to each other in broken terms because of language difficulties, they were always very friendly to each other. The German Grand Prix at the Nurburgring in 1936, motorsport had become a major attraction. Several 100,000 people flocked to the Nurburgring racing circuit whenever a race was held. The smell of car fuel and hot tires, the sporting competitions, and the sound of supercharged engines sent the spectators into raptures. Preparations for the race. The mechanics go about their work with their usual degree of diligence. In addition to the great public idols, the starting lineup include Achille Varzi and the newcomers Rudolf Hasse and Ernst von Delius. Final fingertip tests to see whether all 16 cylinders work. And they're off. And again, Bernd Rosemeyer shows his fans that he is in top form. On the third lap he is timed at 9 minutes 56 seconds. He's therefore the first driver to break the elusive 10-minute barrier for the Nürburgring North Loop. The race ended with a double triumph for Auto Union when Rosemeyer took first place and Stuck was runner-up. 4 out of the first 6 cars across the finishing line were Silver Arrows built in Zwickau. It didn't take long to find out why Bernd Rosemeyer was in such a good mood. Only a few days before the race, he had married Ellie Beinhorn. This success was surpassed in the Swiss Grand Prix when Auto Union drivers Bernd Rosemeyer, Achille Varzi and Hans Stuck filled the first 3 places. Only 5 cars finished the race and 4 of them were from the Auto Union team. In addition to the above-mentioned drivers, the Auto Union team included the following drivers in 36-37. Ernst von Delius, who was killed during the German Grand Prix in 1937. Rudolf Hasse, who, like Delius, had been successful in the past as a sports car driver. And Hermann Paul Müller, who, like Rosemeyer, had taken part in motorcycle races. The Auto Union team even took part in 2 races in South Africa in 1937, with the understandable aim of promoting export interests. The event was organized as a handicap race. Delius and Rosemeyer had to start at the very back of the grid because the organizers assumed that they were better than the other drivers. In spite of the oppressive heat and a course that was anything but kind to tires, Auto Union was still able to celebrate a double triumph in Cape Town. This victory was to be the highlight of Ernst von Delius' racing career.
Na schön, das ist schön. Wollen wir einsteigen? Ja, hier. Hinein! Hinein!
The new steep curve was completed at the Avus racing circuit in Berlin, and Auto Union geared itself up for new challenges, which Bernd Rosemeyer accepted in his usual relaxed manner.
natürlich war es
Außerdem, wenn man nicht Ball fahren, so gemacht.
Rüber.
Wenn jetzt Elli da wäre, will ich gleich wieder.
Strafstunde. Kommt ein zurück.
Geht
Was sagst du von dem Kleinen?
Jetzt fällt er uns auch wieder in.
Enorm, ne?
Rosemeyer startet.
The non-Formula Avus race was held in Berlin at the start of the 1937 racing season. Auto Union took part in this race with a car body that had been developed in a wind tunnel. The final shape of the car body commanded admiration everywhere. The cars were very fast, but also very heavy with a weight of over 1,100 kilograms. The tires therefore became the weak point, and they had to be changed more than usual. The race was won by the Daimler-Benz driver Hermann Lang by the narrowest of margins ahead of the three Auto Union cars. Ernst von Delius successfully finished runner-up in a standard single-seater racing car. Hans Stuck travelled overseas on a special mission. He was to advertise German technology by taking part in the Rio Grand Prix on the 6th of June 1937. It was pouring with rain when the race began, and Stuck led unchallenged until he stopped at the pits to refuel as a precaution. However, this pit stop cost him the race, which was won by Pintacuda.
Achtung, Achtung! Wir starten zum Ziel! Start zum Eiffelrennen 1937! 15 Wagen am Start auf dem Nurburgring.
The International Eiffel Race was again a foregone conclusion for Bernd Rosemeyer. According to the original soundtrack of newsreel excerpts, the mechanics who carried out their work in record time also played a major role in these successes. In the first year of racing, they took 1.5 minutes to change all 4 tires and to fill the tank with 200 litres of fuel. Thanks to all-year-round training and maximum concentration, they performed the same task in 25 seconds during the 1937 Eiffel race. This was an all-time record. The thunderous applause from the grandstands was a just reward for this outstanding achievement. On the 5th of July 1937, German racing cars took part in the race for the Vanderbilt Cup near New York for the first time. Bernd Rosemeyer won this race after a very hard struggle. His hands, which were frequently covered with blisters as a result of the juddering steering wheel, were an indication of just how high the physical demands were on drivers at that time. His laughter and the triumphant gesture with which he accepted the cup are nowadays still the typical pose of a radiant victor. Up-and-coming drivers also made good use of their opportunities at Auto Union. Hasser won his first Grand Prix in Belgium on the 11th of July. While some of his rivals had spectacular crashes, he finished ahead of old hands like Stuck and Lang.
Und erreicht mit einem Renndurchschnitt von über 167 Stundenkilometern das Ziel.
Of course, he was highly delighted with his victory.
Der Nachwuchsfahrer der Auto Union, sein erster Sieg und gleich ein großer Preis.
Absolutely great, Rudy. 1-0 to you. No, 10-0, or even more. All right, then, what was it like? It was great, the way I shot off in front, especially when it didn't even occur to me I might win. But after the halfway mark, when I realized I had it in the can, I gave it a bit more and drove home with my first big prize. You bet, and I'm sure there'll be more of them. Nothing against that. The mid-engined Auto Union cars were unbeatable in hill climbing races. For example, the Kesselberg hill climbing race, where the racing car from the German Museum was presented to an interested audience on the occasion of an anniversary celebration in 1992. The German hill-climbing Grand Prix at Schauinsland was the other race in which the fans of the racing drivers were mainly adolescents. In 1937, the cars had twin wheels on the rear axles to transform more power to the road. Stuck proved once again that his nickname, King of the Mountains, was justified. Rosemeyer finished as runner-up. It was the fourth victory in a row on the same track for Auto Union. The road over the Alps was far more difficult. Here is the Auto Union team on the road to Pescara. The battles with its main rival Mercedes-Benz had become more intense. The racing cars from Untertürkheim now had more power and stamina, but Auto Union had not forgotten how to win. At the Coppa Acerbo, Auto Union cars alone filled 3 of the first 4 places. The race was won by Bernd Rosenmeier, followed by H.P. Müller and Luigi Fagioli. Bernd Rosenmeier describes an exciting incident.
Ja, Sie haben uns ja einen schönen Schrecken eingejagt.
We've just heard how your back wheel rolled into the pits 30 seconds before you drove in on 3 wheels. How did you manage to steer your car the last 250 meters without any mishap?
Ja, was heißt jetzt 250 Meter? Das war schon 2 Kilometer vorher passiert. Da habe ich nicht quer gestanden.
It happened already 2 kilometers back.
Dann hat die Radkappe so einen unglücklichen
I was suddenly lying across the road
in der entgegengesetzter Drehrichtung
because a wheel had blocked,
Das habe ich schon immer drauf gelauert, dass
and I skidded back onto a stone.
Jetzt bin ich schon die 2 Kilometer bis zum Notdepot. Ich wusste, dass das 2 Kilometer waren, ungefähr. Und da bin ich immer schon vorsichtig gefahren, immer auf Druck.
Well, the wheel cap got such a nasty knock, it flew off in the opposite direction.
Wie ich dann beim Notdepot schon bin,
When I finally saw the pit in front of me, the wheel decided to do it on its own.
Und Schon stand ich gleich quer. Und
even although I drove very carefully.
wie ich das gemacht habe, weiß ich auch nicht. Das macht man ganz instinktiv. Und dann
So then I had to drive the last 300 meters on the brake drum.
Bremstrommel weitergefahren.
Wasn't it terribly difficult to get the car back on the road again? Well, I had a go at it too, and then it went as quick as lightning. Anyway, I had a rocket behind me. Caracciola was getting closer and closer.
Weil der Caracciola doch hinter mir war.
In October 1937, a race in the large automobile class was held for the first time at the Donington racing track. The circuit was treacherous. The race was the last to be held using the 750-kilogram formula, and it was the last victory for Bernd Rosemeyer, who again beat all the opposition. It was certainly worth losing a pair of trousers to gain this triumph. The surviving documents of the Auto Union Racing Department are kept in the Saxony State Archives in Dresden. The transport historian, Professor Dr. Peter Kirschberg, has studied these documents for many years and knows more about them than anybody else.
Die Erfolgsbilanz der Auto-Union in der Zeit der 750 Kilo.
The success of Auto Union in the era of the 750-kilogram formula, that is between 1934 and 37, was actually very impressive. A series of charts drawn by Eberhard Eberhorst shows the placings of German racing cars during this period. He chose the color green for Daimler-Benz and red for Auto Union. In terms of quality, the relationship between the two rivals can rightly be regarded as balanced. However, when it comes to quantity, it's obvious that Auto Union is well ahead. Whereas the Swabians were still in front with 12 victories in Grand Prix, compared to 7 by the team from Saxony, the picture was reversed in circuit races. Auto Union notched up 12 victories and Mercedes-Benz 10. The situation was clear-cut in hill climbing races. 13 victories by Auto Union as against 1 for Daimler-Benz. The race successes clearly boosted sales. In 1938, 1 out of every 4 vehicles registered in Germany carried the 4 rings on the radiator grille. This had made Auto Union one of the largest vehicle groups in Germany. The record-breaking runs, which were very popular and had strong public appeal at the time, are a special chapter in themselves. During these years of automobile growth and maturation, record attempts were not only spectacular events, although the advertising effect was enormous, but also a prime opportunity to test a car's limits under real driving conditions, since there were hardly any facilities at that time for simulating these conditions. After his record-breaking run in March 1934, Stuck set further records, in particular in February 1935 near the Italian town of Lucca. In October 1937, a record-breaking week was held for the first time. Auto Union was extremely well prepared, and the week turned out to be a great success for the company. During the week, Rosemeyer was the first driver to exceed the 400 km/h barrier on a normal road. streamlined body developed by Iberan and Porsche's aerodynamics experts made a major contribution towards achieving such a high speed. The record set by Rosemeyer over 1 kilometer from a standing start was even more remarkable from a technical point of view, since it depended on maximum acceleration and thus primarily on the intuition of the driver in using the accelerator and knowing when to change gear. Auto Union was also represented at Mercedes-Benz' next record-breaking attempts on the 28th of January 1938.
Ist bei neuen Rekordversuchen auf der Frankfurter Autobahn tödlich verunglückt.
After the record-breaking run of 432 kilometers per hour by Caracciola in the morning, it was Rosemeyer's turn on the test track. Mathematically speaking, his car was capable of reaching a speed of 440 kilometers per hour. And in fact, he was 1 kilometer per hour faster than his rival on the outward run. However, on the return run, his car left the track and turned over, killing Bernd Rosemeyer instantly. After that, Auto Union never again took part in record-breaking runs. The D model was unveiled for the first time before the home public at the German Grand Prix on the 27th of July 1938. After the death of Rosemeyer, the Italian Tazio Nuvolari was signed up for the team. The opposition comprised a well-known phalanx of Mercedes drivers, Manfred von Brauchitsch, Rudolf Caracciola, Hermann Lang and the young Englishman Dick Seaman. The Auto Union team was again completed by Hans Stuck, Rudolf Hasser and H.P. Müller.
Der große Zweikampf ist entbrannt. Über 500 Kilometer, 22 Runden, 22 Mal sind die 174 Kurven des Nurburgringes zu durchfahren.
It was plain to see that Auto Union had fallen behind its competitors because work on developing a new car had started too late in Zwickau. Stuck and Nuvolari finished this race third and fourth, but they had no bearing on the final outcome.
Müller übergibt seinen Wagen an Nuvolari, der mit gespannten Kräften auf den Einsatz wartet. Hans Stuck hält. Der Neubauer reißt von Brauchitsch geistesgegenwärtig aus dem Wagen. Seaman fährt um die Brandstelle herum, wieder ins Rennen. Die Ereignisse und Zwischenfälle jagen einander in den letzten Runden. Räumer, der gut gefahren ist, muss aufgeben. Nuvolari, der an dritter Stelle lag, mit der Schienen entlang, muss kurz vor Schluss noch einmal halten. Hans Stuck ist jetzt an dritter Stelle. Seaman, der junge Engländer, siegt in einem dramatischen Rennen. Es ist sein erster großer Erfolg auf Mercedes-Benz. Hermann Lang, der Tripoli-Sieger, ist Zweiter. Hans Stuck hat den Auto-Union-Wagen auf einen ehrenvollen 3. Platz gebracht.
In 1938, a new formula was introduced. For the first time, there were separate classes for supercharged and naturally aspirated engines. Since the contract with Porsche had not been renewed at the end of 1937, Eberan Eberhorst was now responsible for design work. He designed a 12-cylinder engine whose blocks were aligned at an angle of 60 degrees. 3 camshafts, in contrast to only 1 in the past, were now used for valve control. This made the engine more complex but increased its speed. The 3-litre supercharged engined car weighed 850 kilograms, excluding water, oil, fuel and the driver. A striking new feature of the chassis was the rear axle. The car now had a so-called de Dion axle, which combined a rigid axle tube with 2 drive shafts. The fuel tank was no longer situated at the rear, but positioned by the side of the driver. This reduced the size of the car by 17 centimeters, and the driver no longer had to sit so far forward, but more in the center of the car. In the course of the season, the Auto Union team once again demonstrated that rare ability of making something out of a seemingly hopeless situation and fighting its way to the front. After the death of Bernd Rosemeyer, all hopes rested on the Italian champion driver Tazio Nuvolari. During the Swiss Grand Prix in the previous year, he was to contest a race for the Auto Union team, but then sportingly handed over his car to Rosemeyer when the latter had to drop out for technical problems. We must thank the former European Kodak representative, George Monkhouse, for this rare original colour film. In autumn, Tazio Nuvolari won the Italian Grand Prix in Monza and the race in Donington for the 4 rings. The race, which was held on the almost unchanged, bumpy, twisty circuit, did not pass without incident when one of the competitors lost some oil. It turned out to be Tazio Nuvolari's day. He took the lead after it had changed several times in the race, and he held the number 1 spot impressively right to the checkered flag without being challenged. In the last year of racing, 1939, the team was strengthened by 2 up-and-coming drivers. Ulrich Bigalke, who until then had accompanied Auto Union during its race with a cinefilm camera and who was responsible for many of these eventful visual shots, and Schorsch Meyer, one of the most popular motorcycle racers in Germany at that time. I think Auto Union tested 8 or 10 drivers at the Nurburgring racing circuit over a period of a few months. I remember the date exactly. It was November the 8th, 1938, when I drove a racing car for the first time at the Nurburgring. They took our overall times, split times, etc. I was the fastest of all the new drivers, and Auto Union said that I was the man for their team. Although my racing car was on fire, they pulled me out. But I soon got back in again, and I had burns everywhere, but I still managed to finish in 2nd place. Auto Union once again staked its claim to the role of victor with the double triumph at the French Grand Prix in Rouen, where Meyer finished runner-up behind H.P. Müller. Tazio Nuvolari turned the final race by supercharged racing cars on the 3rd of September 1939 into a victory for Auto Union. This was the last race in which the Silver Arrows took part. From that day on, they became part of history.
The first and most important showplaces were the wonderful, winding, tricky, cruel, endless rally courses. The arrival of the Quattro, with its fresh vision, remarkable technology, and a rate of forward progress that everybody understood, revived the whole sport and triggered off a worldwide rally boom. The Quattro made its rally debut at the 1981 January Rally in Austria. It was driven by Wittmann and Nestinger, whose privilege it was to celebrate the Quattro's first victory. The Quattro was immediately entered for the World Championship, the first round of which was the Monte Carlo Rally, a daunting challenge to any newcomer. Our first star is Hanno Mikkola from Finland. On the 26th of January 1981, he became a topic of general amazement.
We did the first stage quite near Grenoble, short one, 14 k's, but all the way uphill nearly. And I remember Darnis started in front of me, 1 minute in front of me, and when I had done 7 k's, I passed him. So that was a real shock for everybody.
The newcomer upset the entire competition. "We've been asleep for too long," said one team manager, "and now comes the rude awakening. It was time to get down to work." Despite the fine-sounding names of the other manufacturers and drivers, they had no chance against the new technology. The Quattro had turned the rally hierarchy upside down. When the service teams brought them to the rally circuits, the first production Quattros were quickly surrounded by admiring crowds. Autumn in Tuscany and a stopover in Siena during the most attractive event of the era, the Sanremo Rally. The event is in its 3rd day and something unheard of is happening. A woman, Michèle Mouton, is ahead of the field in a World Championship rally and hasn't the slightest intention of giving up her lead. The event reaches its climax in a tense finale between the ladies and the great Ari Vatanen. But Michèle Mouton, co-driver Fabrizia Pons, and the Audi Quattro remain safely ahead and enter the history books as the first women's team to win a World Championship rally. For Quattro technology, this was a delightfully new interpretation of a great idea. Michèle may well have been the fastest woman ever to get behind the steering wheel of a car, but to defeat all the male competitors in a technical sport, now that was something out of the ordinary.
It's true that at that point, the fact to be a woman was a a point particular where the fans wanted to come and see me more closer and everything, and touch me. I remember forever, of course, Portugal and Greece, for example, and even Ivory Coast.
Rallying's new diversity, its changed surroundings and the popularity of its stars triggered off a worldwide boom in this sport at the beginning of the 1980s. It captivated the media and above all the spectators themselves, the people who were determined to witness it at first hand. The heart of the rally enthusiast is a kind of quattro too, turbocharged and driving for all it's worth. (1982) was the year Audi easily won the manufacturer's title in the World Championship, although the competition certainly didn't give them any quarter. Towards the end of the year, when the points were added together to decide who the world champion driver was, the contest was still open. Two drivers were in the running, Walter Rühl in an Opel and Michel Mouton in an Audi. The Ivory Coast Rally, the last event of the year, was the decider. The Ivory Coast Rally is a small reminder of how rallying was born and what it stood for. Tests of reliability, driving from A to B across sparsely inhabited areas when what counts most is simply getting through. The big story of this rally was therefore Michel Mouton versus Walter Rühl. We have to face the facts and admit that Michel failed to get the championship title as a result of a minor technical malfunction, a broken gearbox. A feeling of frustration prevails. Nothing can put you back up among the leaders, so getting the car back on the road is the only victory left to relish. By now it was time to get the man who had put up such stiff opposition to transfer to the Audi team. So in the winter of 1984, Walter Rühl arrived as a four-wheel drive trainee, accompanied by Christian Geistdorfer, his co-driver. Together with Blomqvist, Nicola and Mouton, this was the most powerful team Audi had ever fielded. Rühl's Quattro debut in the first World Championship event was convincing, and he obviously took a delight in showing what he could do. In other words, driving calmly to victory in the Monte Carlo Rally.
Ich glaube einfach generell, dass die 70er, 80er Jahren waren einfach das Jahrzehnt des Automobils. Das war einfach, das Automobil hat plötzlich, war das Ziel eines jeden, dieses Gefühl der Freiheit, dass ich ein Auto habe, dass ich überall in kürzester Zeit hinfahren kann, dass ich mir die Welt anschauen kann. Und dort hat natürlich auch der Sport dazugehört.
Incredible years in the history of a make in the accomplishment of an idea. Highlights included Hanno Mikkola's Drivers' World Championship title in 1983, and Audi's second Manufacturers' World Championship title in 1984, which was accompanied by Stig Blomqvist winning the Drivers' Award. Times grew tougher as competitors set to and converted their cars to four-wheel drive. Thoroughbred racing vehicles were being built everywhere, not based in the least on series production. As this escalation in complexity continued, Audi put its imagination into overdrive and made the next quantum leap in its development work. This was the successor to the Sports Quattro, the S1. The S1's rivals were all sports racing cars, adhering to the extreme power philosophy and employing the first generation of electronic sorcerer's apprentices. Compact, venomous, and excessive. This is where we enter a nirvana with some of the most exotic driving of all time.
Im Prinzip bist du bei dem Auto mit dem Denken schon zu langsam. 50 rechts minus Ihnen, sofort Aufgruppe, rechts voll Ihnen, 80, Achtung, Nachgruppe links minus, voll 40, Achtung, links.
It was too much. The whole business revved up out of control and exploded. 1985 and 1986 will be remembered as the craziest years of rally driving. The sport's popularity led to spectator problems, which threatened to get out of control. In 1986, Audi therefore withdrew the S1 from active rally participation, as it was simply impossible to continue in these circumstances and in the absence of adequate safety measures. In 1987, a new philosophy fortunately prevailed, and new Group A rules were compiled. The thought of tackling the Safari Rally with the highly civilized Quattro 200 was most exhilarating. Audi's drivers were Hanno Mikkola and Walter Rühl. The 30-year myth that the Safari could only be won by a workhorse of the simplest possible design was exposed. Suddenly, the businessman saloons, with all their high-tech intelligence, began to take the checkered flag. It was this relaxed situation, seeing how the 200 would do in Africa without the pressure of competition, that led quite unexpectedly to a milestone in Audi sports history. 2 Audis took part, with first place going to Mikkola and second place to Rühl. This was Audi's first victory in the Safari, and the first win by a 4-wheel drive car. However, the feeling developed within Audi that there was nothing else to prove. Everything had been said and done, and the company's wildest dreams had all come true. In 1987, Audi therefore announced its retirement from rallying.